In the desolate expanse of the Western Plains, a drama of conscience unfolded. At sunrise, 50 souls, formerly bound by the chains of slavery, stood before the wrought iron gates of Silas Garrett's ranch. The air crackled with anticipation, their hushed whispers echoing like the rustling of dry leaves before a storm. The scene was a stark contrast to the cold spectacle that had unfolded the previous day. In the heart of town, upon a weathered platform stained with the echoes of past transactions, sat a woven basket. Inside, nestled in tattered fabric, lay a black infant, no older than 6 months, an innocent caught in the cruel machinery of a merciless system. The auctioneer's voice, sharp and piercing, cleaved through the morning air like a hawk's cry. "What am I bid for this promising child? Strong blood, destined for labor in the fields. Do I hear $20? A flurry of hands shot skyward, each bid a testament to the dehumanizing nature of the trade. Men in dusty hats barked out numbers, their voices devoid of empathy, treating the infant as mere chattel. The baby's skin, glistening with a sheen of sweat under the relentless sun, reflected his vulnerability, his tiny fists clenched in unspoken protest. Women in the crowd, their faces etched with a mixture of pity and resignation, averted their gaze, unable to bear witness to such blatant injustice. Yet, the bidding continued, fueled by greed and the ingrained acceptance of a morally bankrupt system. At the periphery of the throng stood Silas Garrett, his presence radiating an aura of quiet authority. His face, etched with the harsh lines of time and loss, betrayed no emotion, his calloused hands firmly gripping the reins of his sturdy steed. At 45, Silas had carved a name for himself as the most prosperous rancher in the territory, a man of unwavering resolve and considerable wealth. But beneath the veneer of success lay a profound loneliness, a void that echoed with the memories of a life tragically cut short. 5 long winters had passed since a relentless fever had claimed his beloved wife and cherished daughter, leaving Silas adrift in a sea of grief. He had retreated into himself, speaking only when necessity dictated, his heart encased in a fortress of solitude. The auctioneer's gaze swept across the assembled crowd, settling upon Silas with a calculated glint. Everyone knew of the rancher's reputation for acquiring only the most robust workers, willing to pay handsomely for quality and efficiency. "Mr. Garrett," the auctioneer boomed, his voice laced with thinly veiled expectation. "Surely you will recognize the value of this fine specimen." The air grew thick with anticipation as the current bid rested at a mere $35. Silence descended upon the square, broken only by the infant's increasingly frantic cries. All eyes turned to Silas, the unspoken understanding hanging heavy in the air. In this town, power reigned supreme, and Silas Garrett was its undisputed sovereign. He held the power to claim whatever he desired, without challenge or consequence. Silas's gaze lingered on the baby, a flicker of something long dormant igniting within his soul. A fleeting expression, a confluence of pain, remembrance, and a depth of emotion beyond the crowd's comprehension, momentarily softened his hardened features. The infant's desperate cries pierced the veil of Silas's self-imposed isolation, resonating with an unbearable purity. "No," Silas declared, his voice resonating with an unexpected conviction that carried across the hushed square. "I will not bid." A collective gasp swept through the crowd, the murmur of disbelief rippling through the assembled masses. Men who had known Silas for decades exchanged stunned glances, their faces etched with bewilderment. The auctioneer's hammer, poised to strike, remained suspended in mid-air, frozen in a tableau of disbelief. In a place where human lives were routinely bought and sold like livestock, the wealthiest man had deliberately turned away from an easy acquisition. "But Mr. Garrett," the auctioneer stammered, struggling to regain his composure, "surely you have need of—" "I said no," Silas reiterated, his voice brooking no argument. He turned his horse, his back presented to the platform, a silent act of defiance against the established order. "Find another buyer." As he rode away, the whispers of the crowd pursued him like shadows, fueled by speculation and conjecture. Some dismissed him as weak, while others wondered if grief had finally shattered his sanity. However, amidst the hushed murmurs, a woman in a faded blue dress observed his departure with unwavering intensity. Her name was Dina Ross, and she had been anticipating this moment for longer than anyone could imagine, harboring a secret hope that had sustained her through years of hardship. The baby's cries intensified as the bidding resumed, the sounds of desperation echoing through the square, yet Silas did not falter, his resolve unwavering. Little did he know that his single act of refusal had set in motion a chain of events that would irrevocably alter the course of his life. An extraordinary convergence of circumstances would bring 50 individuals to his doorstep before the sun graced the horizon once more. Silas would be confronted with an agonizing choice, a battle between the carefully constructed walls of his solitary existence and a fight that would ultimately define his character, his moral compass, and his legacy. Silas spurred his horse onward, his pace relentless, the dust cloud billowing behind him mirroring the tempest brewing within his soul. The town's murmurs reverberated in his mind, but louder than any voice was the sound that haunted him relentlessly, the baby's desperate cries, a constant reminder of another voice, another helpless soul he had failed to protect. His sprawling ranch stretched across the valley like a kingdom of solitude, the vast expanse of land offering little solace for the emptiness that pervaded his life. Cattle grazed in the distant fields, their presence a stark contrast to the silence that enveloped the main house, a silence that had become both his sanctuary and his prison. Laughter no longer echoed through those rooms, and the patter of small feet had long faded from the wooden floors. The silence had become his penance, the price he had willingly paid for surviving when his family could not. As Silas dismounted his weary horse, a chilling discovery sent a jolt of adrenaline through his veins. An abundance of fresh hoofprints marred the pristine earth surrounding his property. These were not the tracks of stray cattle or casual passers-by. Dozens of them crisscrossed the landscape, a clear indication of a deliberate and methodical presence. Someone had been watching his land, circling it like predators sizing up their prey. He retrieved his trusty rifle from the barn, its weight reassuring in his grip, and began a cautious perimeter check. The tracks led in every direction, yet they shared a common endpoint, vantage point strategically overlooking his house. Whoever had been present possessed intimate knowledge of his routines, his vulnerabilities, and his blind spots. As the sun began its descent, casting long shadows across the valley, Silas detected movement in the tree line. A figure on horseback, barely discernible through the dense foliage. Then another, and another, emerging from the shadows like specters in the fading light. They no longer concealed themselves, their intentions becoming increasingly apparent. They wanted him to see them, to acknowledge their presence. His grip tightened on the rifle, his senses on high alert. In all his years of solitude, no one had dared to intrude upon his land uninvited. His reputation, forged in the fires of self-reliance and a willingness to defend his property with lethal force, had served as an effective deterrent to trespassers. But these riders were different, their movements deliberate, their coordination suggesting careful planning and unwavering resolve. Just as the sun touched the horizon, painting the sky in fiery hues, a solitary rider emerged from the trees. It was the woman in the faded blue dress, Dina Ross, her face resolute, her gaze unwavering. She rode with the confidence of someone who had already lost everything, her dark eyes fixed on Silas with an intensity that made him instinctively step back. She halted just beyond rifle range, her voice ringing clear through the evening air, carrying the weight of unspoken pleas and long-held hopes. "Silas Garrett, we need to talk." "Get off my land," Silas retorted, his voice sharp, his rifle raised in warning. "I don't know what you want, but you won't find it here." Dina remained unmoved, her gaze unwavering. "You know exactly what we want. The same thing you wanted when you turned your back on that auction. The same thing that has been gnawing at your soul since you lost your family." Her words struck Silas with the force of a physical blow, shattering the carefully constructed walls he had erected around his heart. How could this stranger possess such intimate knowledge of his deepest pain? How could she see through the armor that had shielded him from the world for so long? "You don't know anything about me," he retorted, his voice losing its edge, tinged with a vulnerability he had long suppressed. "I know you were the only man in that square who saw a baby, not property. Dina responded, her voice softening, yet retaining its unwavering conviction. I know you're the only one who looked at that child and remembered what it means to be human. As darkness enveloped the landscape, more riders emerged from the trees. 10, then 20, then 30, their numbers steadily increasing. All of them were former slaves, their faces bearing the indelible marks of suffering and resilience. Yet, amidst the pain etched on their features, Silas detected a glimmer of something profound, a desperate, almost dangerous hope. What happens at sunrise changes everything, Dina declared, her voice echoing through the night. You can face it alone, or you can face it with us. But either way, Mr. Garrett, what began in that square today will not end until that baby is safe. The riders melted back into the darkness, leaving Silas alone with his thoughts, consumed by the growing certainty that his days of isolation were about to come to a violent and irreversible end. Silas spent the night pacing the confines of his empty house, his mind racing, his senses on high alert. Every shadow outside his windows held the potential for danger, and every sound in the darkness could be the prelude to an act of violence. He meticulously loaded every rifle he owned, strategically positioning them throughout the house. Yet he knew, deep down, that weapons alone would not solve the impending crisis. The woman's words reverberated through his mind, her accusations cutting deep. How did she know about his family, about the pain that had haunted him for years? How did she know that seeing that helpless infant on the auction block had reopened wounds he thought long healed? The memories of his daughter's final days washed over him, a tidal wave of grief threatening to drown him. He relived the agonizing helplessness of holding her frail hand, listening to her labored breathing, watching as the relentless fever consumed her small body. He had vowed never to experience that level of powerlessness again, never to care so deeply that loss could devastate him so completely. Yet, the infant's cries had pierced his defenses, reminding him of the man he once was before grief had turned his heart to stone. As dawn approached, Silas ascended to his rooftop to survey his land, a knot of dread tightening in his stomach. The sight that greeted him sent a shockwave of icy fear through his veins. They had not exaggerated. From every direction, riders emerged. From the rolling hills, the dense forest, the distant valleys, a diverse assembly of men and women on horseback, moving with a coordinated purpose toward his ranch. At their forefront rode Dina Ross, no longer alone, but leading what appeared to be a formidable force. This was not an attack formation. Their intentions were not hostile. As they drew closer, Silas observed that they carried no weapons, but instead shovels, hammers, rope, and provisions, each tool suggesting a purpose beyond mere destruction. They were planning something, but their intentions were not clear. The riders formed a semicircle around his house, close enough to communicate yet maintaining a respectful distance. Dina dismounted, approaching him on foot, her hands visible, her posture non-threatening. "Mr. Garrett," she called up to him, her voice carrying the weight of years of repressed emotions. "We are not here to fight you. We're here to offer you something that no one has offered you in the last 5 years." "And what is that?" Silas shouted down, his rifle still in his grasp, his guard up. A chance to save the life instead of watching one slip away. Her words pierced through his defenses, striking at the very core of his being. Each person present in that semicircle had suffered the loss of loved ones, victims of a heartless system that commodified human lives. They had buried their children, spouses, and parents, their hearts bearing the scars of unimaginable loss. They understood his pain, for they shared the same wounds, the same haunting memories. "That baby from the auction," Dina continued, her voice laden with empathy, "was sold to Marcus Webb, a man notorious for his cruelty, a man who exploits children until they collapse. That infant will not see his second birthday if we don't intervene." Silas felt the carefully constructed walls of his heart begin to crumble, the weight of his past pressing down on him with renewed intensity. Webb was indeed notorious, a man who viewed human suffering as a mere cost of doing business. "By noon today," Dina declared, her voice resolute, "we are going to Webb's ranch, and we are going to rescue that child. We are asking you to join us, not because we need your weapons or your wealth, but because that baby needs someone who understands what it means to fight for family." The sun climbed higher, illuminating the landscape, and Silas recognized that he stood at a critical juncture, a point of no return that would forever define his existence. Silas descended from the roof, his mind grappling with the enormity of the situation. 50 people had come to his land, individuals who had every reason to resent men like him, men who had prospered while they endured unspeakable suffering in chains. Yet, they stood before him, not seeking retribution, but extending a hand of fellowship. "You are planning to steal from Marcus Webb," Silas said as he approached Dina, his voice laced with a mixture of apprehension and curiosity. "That makes you outlaws, and it makes anyone who helps you an outlaw as well." "We prefer the term liberators," Dina replied, her lips curving into a wry smile. "And you are already an outlaw, Mr. Garrett. The moment you refused to bid on that baby, you declared war on a system that treats children like livestock." "Oh," Silas surveyed the faces surrounding him. Elderly men bearing the scars of whippings, women who had witnessed their children being sold, and young men with eyes reflecting a profound sense of loss. They were not simply asking him to participate in a raid. They were imploring him to remember his humanity, to reconnect with the values he had long abandoned. "Webb has 12 armed men guarding his property," Silas stated, emphasizing the gravity of the situation. "What you are proposing could turn into a bloodbath." "Perhaps," Dina conceded, her expression unwavering. "But that baby is slowly dying every day he remains there. Sometimes a swift death is more merciful than a prolonged one." Her words struck a chord within Silas, mirroring the thoughts that had haunted him during his daughter's final days. The unbearable desire to trade places with her, to alleviate her suffering. The sense of helplessness had almost driven him to madness. "There might be another way," Silas suggested, a spark of inspiration igniting within his mind. "Webb is a businessman above all else. He is driven by profit and he responds to pressure. What if we could make keeping that baby more costly than releasing him?" Dina's eyes narrowed with curiosity. "What are you suggesting?" "Webb supplies beef to a significant portion of the territory. He relies on my cattle more than he does on one infant. If I threaten to cut off his supply and make it clear that keeping that baby will result in substantial losses, he might be willing to negotiate." Dina pressed him. "But what is to stop him from simply taking the baby and fleeing? What prevents him from calling the authorities on all of us?" Silas felt a stirring of hope intertwined with a deep sense of dread. If he chose to participate in this risky endeavor, there would be no turning back. If he failed, the infant would endure unimaginable suffering because of his actions, and if he succeeded, he would have to learn to care again, with the constant fear of loss. "Mr. Garrett," Dina spoke softly, "I understand your fear. We all share it, but fear is simply love with nowhere to go. That baby deserves to have someone fight for him, in the way you wish someone had fought for your daughter." As the sun ascended higher, 50 pairs of eyes awaited his response, their hopes pinned on his decision. In the distance, smoke billowed from Webb's ranch, the fate of an innocent child hanging in the balance. Silas shifted his gaze from the faces of the people surrounding him to his solitary house looming in the background. He had chosen safety over connection, isolation over vulnerability, but here now, he recognized that safety was nothing more than a slow form of death. "I will join you," he said, his voice strong. "However, we will proceed cautiously. We will avoid violence unless Webb forces us to use it. We will attempt negotiation." The relief that washed over Dina's face conveyed the desperation of their situation. These people were prepared to confront almost certain death rather than allow that baby to endure another day of suffering. Within minutes, the group was in motion. Silas rode alongside Dina at the forefront, his spirit more alive than it had been since his family had passed. The weight of his loneliness had lifted, replaced by a new purpose. "How did you know?" Silas asked as they rode. "How did you know that I lost a daughter?" "The way you looked at that baby," Dina answered. "The same way I looked at my son before they sold him 15 years ago. Some pain leaves scars that only other broken parents can see." Her confession impacted Silas like a physical blow. This woman had dedicated herself to the well-being of other people's children because she was unable to fight for her own, mirroring his own predicament. As they reached the crest of the hill overlooking Webb's ranch, Silas's blood ran cold. The property was more like a fortress than a farm, with armed guards patrolling the perimeter and watchtowers at each corner. Webb had constructed his empire on brutality, and he was ready for a conflict. "Jesus," one of the riders behind them said softly. "How are we going to get past that?" Silas was assessing the layout with the knowledge of a seasoned leader. Webb's defenses were formidable, but they were created to withstand an assault. They were not ready for what he was planning. "Dina, take half of the group around to the north pasture. Make yourselves noticeable, but do not approach. I want Webb to believe that you are planning to stampede his cattle." "What about the other half?" "They will remain here with me. We will walk straight up to the front door and request a business meeting." The audacity of the plan caused murmurs. "Webb knows me," Silas added. "He will want to listen to what I have to say, especially if he believes there is money to be made. Once I am inside, I will find that baby and figure out our options." "And what if he chooses to shoot you?" Dina inquired. Silas smiled. "Then you will know that negotiation is not possible." As the group split up, Silas felt the familiar weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. But this time, he was not alone. This time, 50 people depended on him to achieve what he failed to do 5 years ago. The guards at Webb's gate recognized Silas immediately. His wealth opened doors that would have remained shut for others. He dismounted in Webb's courtyard, scanning every shadow for potential threats. Marcus Webb appeared from his house and extended a hand that Silas accepted. "Silas Garrett, what do I owe this pleasure?" "Business, Marcus," Silas said. "Always business. I heard you made a purchase at yesterday's auction." "Ah, the infant, a smart investment. In 10 years that boy will be worth 10 times what I paid for him. Assuming he lives, of course. That is what I came to discuss." Webb motioned towards the house. "Let's talk inside." Silas heard it. The infant was crying. Webb led him to a study with contracts. On the desk was a glass of whiskey and bills of sale. "What is this proposition?" Webb asked. "I need workers for my spring cattle drive, and I will pay premium prices. I will take the infant off of your hands for 3 times what you paid for him. Plus, I will allow you to pick my cattle first for the next 5 years." It was too much. Webb squinted. "Why that child? There are others available. Fresh stock trains easier, no bad habits." From somewhere in the house, the baby started crying harder. Webb went to the window, looking at his guards. "I have heard rumors about you, Silas, about your behavior and riders by your property." Silas felt ice forming. "I am a businessman, Marcus." "Really?" Webb said, taking off his mask. "Because it seems like you are running some kind of underground railroad operation and you are dangerous to men like me." The crying stopped. Silas realized he had been trapped. "Here is my counteroffer. Leave right now and my men will not shoot you for trespassing. Stay or ever come back here and I will make sure that baby dies slowly while you watch." Webb expected Silas to back down, but Silas was not like most men. "You are right, Marcus. I am dangerous to men like you, but not how you think." Webb reached for the gun at his hip, but Silas talked. "You have built your whole operation on fear. You count on people being too scared to stand up to you. But what happens when they are not alone anymore?" Shouts came from outside. Dina's group was moving. There were more riders appearing. "What the hell?" Webb started, but Silas cut him off. "Word spreads quickly. 50 people came to my ranch and they stopped at every place where decent people live. It turns out there are a lot of people that are sick of your business." Webb grinned. "This is insurrection. I will have everyone hanged for this." "Maybe, but first you have to survive it." The front door bursted open. "Where is the baby?" Dina demanded. Silas pinned Webb. The baby's crying started again as doors opened, feet running, voices calling for an alarm. Dina returned with a small bundle. "It is over, Webb," Silas said as they got ready to leave. "The game that you have been playing for years ends today," Webb cackled. "You think this changes anything? There are 100 Marcus Webbs, and now you have declared war on all of them." Silas looked down at Webb and felt peace. "There are 100 Marcus Webbs, but today there are 100 people that said, 'Enough.' Tomorrow there might be 200, next week 1,000. Dina held the baby close, crying. "What is his name?" "Name?" Webb asked. "He is property. Property does not need names." "Then we will give him one. Samuel. His name is Samuel." As they left Webb's ranch, Silas realized that the 50 people changed everything. They showed him that isolation was not strength. It was another form of surrender. "What happens now?" Dina asked. "Now we go home." The ride back to Silas's ranch was different. Samuel was passed around. By the time they reached the property, the baby had 50 guardians. Samuel became the first child of a new community, one that refused to see people as property. Dina moved into Silas's house to help take care of the boy, and others joined them. The lonely ranch became a refuge, a symbol of what was possible when people stood together. Webb was right about one thing. They declared war. However, they had discovered something more powerful, the force of humanity. Years later, when Samuel was old enough, Silas would tell him about the day 50 people stood at the gate and changed the world, about how sometimes victories start with a single refusal to participate in cruelty, about family. The loner found his purpose, the community found its courage, and Samuel found something that money could not buy, a home. So what have we learned from Silas, Dina, and baby Samuel? It's really a story about how even in the darkest of times, a single act of defiance, a simple refusal to accept injustice, can spark a flame of change. It's about how human connection, standing together and choosing compassion, can build a world far stronger and brighter than any fortress built on greed and fear. It reminds us that family isn't just about blood, it's about the people willing to fight for you and for a future where everyone is valued and loved simply for being human. What resonated with you most in this story? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Do you have any questions about the characters, the setting, or the themes? Maybe you have a similar story to share? Let's start a conversation. And if you enjoyed this exploration of hope, courage, and the power of community, please consider subscribing. I've got more stories like this coming up and I wouldn't want you to miss out. Thanks for watching.